All right. Hi, good evening. Matilde, how are you? Is everything okay?
Good evening. I'm okay, thank you.
Good. Let's begin, please, the class. We're going to start with this lesson before we go into the extra practice that we got for today. And this is adjective clauses once again, but we are going to see the case that I told you, right? We've been practicing with general nouns. Well, it means, right, the person, the man, the boy, the girl, something that is very, very general. But now we're going to see what happens when we have these specific cases. I already mentioned what we have to do, but we're going to make it official here. So, actually, let's try to explain, please, and I would like you to help me in this case, Matilde. We know that we use which, right, for objects, and it can work as subject and as object, and it happens the same with who, right? It can be subject and it can be object, but instead of who, we have to change to whom. It happens in both cases, right? Or which, but which doesn't change. That's why we don't notice when it's subject or object easily, but here we do. So, how can you explain the way, well, actually, how we can identify when one is subject or object? What rules do we have in that case for the prepositions? And what happens specifically for who and whom? What do you know and what do you remember about that, Emma?
Okay, well, I remember in the first case, well, the main idea is Peter was talking about the party and the information which is related to the subject. The remaining idea the remaining idea, it's focused on the party. I mean, it's describing the party. The party was incredible. And that's the subject of the sentence. And in the case of the object part, it's related about someone else's description about that, so that ends up being the object of the sentence, not like the first one. Yeah, and well, of course, in the who and whom, that will change. Yeah, that changes, but it's the same. In the first part, it's related to person, and it is at the beginning of the sentence, and the other one is at the end. So that's another way to recognize it as well.
Great, there you go, right? So you have that clear. That's great. It is perfect. And the question about the preposition, what are the two places, right, in which we can play the preposition when we have it, right? For example, in this case, right, with whom, we see a preposition there. So what are the two places, right, in which we can use it, and which one is the best option sometimes?
Okay, Peter was talking about a person at home. Oh, well, I remember that we talked about one that it was before whom, in this case, and I think the other option, it was at the end of the sentence, right?
But more precisely, when? Because remember, the sentence or the clause in this case, right, can be in the middle of a more complete idea, or you can have other complements of time, right? So do we put this preposition at the end of the clause, at the end of everything, even if we have other words, or does it have to be after the verb that requires that preposition? What do you say?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure.
For example, in this, let's try. If let's pretend that the sentence is this. Peter was talking about the person at whom a dog barked yesterday. All right. So what are you going to say if it's at the end? Are you going to say at whom a dog barked yesterday at, or at whom a dog barked at yesterday? Which one do you believe would be the best option? Because what you're saying is correct. It can be before the time clause, or in this case, sorry, the adjective clause, with whom. That's great. But the other one, which one do you believe is the best option? The dog barked at yesterday, or a dog barked yesterday at?
I would say yesterday at.
It seems right to be good, but actually we require the preposition to be next to the verb. All right, it has to be next to the verb. Why? Because if not, we're not going to have the specific right usage and purpose of that verb. If it's at the beginning of the clause, we know that it's related to the verb that comes next to the clause, right? So we know that it's next to bark. But the only reason not to put the preposition here is because we believe that it's better to keep the preposition next to the verb that is producing that preposition, right? Remember, we call these like collocations, right? Think about, bark at, right? Be good at also, and so on. So the idea is to keep them together, and the only reason to separate them is when you put it at the beginning of the clause. All right. If not, it is not going to be a good idea to put it after other words. All right. So grammatically speaking, at least that is going to be the rule. All right. So I believe that this is clear in a certain way because we practice this a lot. But I want to know if you have any questions, please, Matilde. Let me know about which subject and object, which is the same, right, as you were saying, and who, right? The thing that changes is the word, but the role is the same as with which. So what do you say? Any questions or comments so that we can go now to the part that I told you? Those are restrictive and non-restrictive clauses.
Just to clarify, so the correct option there, it should be, Peter was talking about the person whom a dog bark. No.
The second option is that one. The person whom a dog barked at, right? But remember, that's also formal, but the best option is the one that you see here. But the second best option, and actually the grammatically accepted option after this, okay, this is the best option to put it before the clause. But the second one is after the verb that has the preposition by itself. In this case, it is bark, right? If you say, for example, Peter was talking about the person, right, at whom, oh, no, not at whom, about, I'm going to say, all right, about whom we were thinking yesterday. Okay, so in that case, if you want to use the second type, it would be two times about, and it's not incorrect. You're going to say, Peter was talking about the person whom we were thinking about yesterday. All right, but you don't say whom we were thinking yesterday about, right? It's going to be we were thinking about yesterday. Okay, so those are the two correct places before the clause about whom or after the verb that produces the preposition. Think about, bark at, good at, interested in, right? Depending on, and so on and so forth. All right. I don't know if you have more questions, Matilde. Let me know.
No more questions. It was just a...
Okay, very good. So, and we know about whose, right? Let's try to remember this a little bit, right? I remember that the time that we practiced, it was clear as well, but it was the one that perhaps produced a little bit more complications in the sense of how we can combine the two ideas, right? But remember, to make this correct, you have to first mention the owner, then a possession of the owner, and then you mix those two ideas and you have the owner, whose, and the possession with the clause. That is the adjective clause, right? The same here. The owner, we call it owner, even though it can be a part of it, like in this case, it's a part of it. The table is the owner or the global thing, right? From which a part is belonging in this case. And in this case, we can say the table owner, whose, it talks about possession, and leg, it belongs to the table. All right, so here I want to practice with not writing, just speaking, giving some ideas. First, I want to know if you have any questions before practicing a little bit, Matilde. Let me know, please.
No, no questions, I think.
All right, so let's try not to combine, not to give the two first ideas, directly the one that is the complete idea. Try to give me two examples, please, in which you are using whose to connect the main sentence with the adjective clause. So what do you say? What could it be?
Okay. I no, I borrowed, but I mean it has to be not that specific, right? In these cases, in order if
Correct. It has to be very general. Like anything that is too general, like using the article the or a or an, but even if you use the, it doesn't have to be unique, because in that case, it's also going to be specific, right? General as this one, right? The person, the guy, the boy, the dog, and something like that.
Okay. Like he forgot the money whose
And in that case, just to help a little bit, if you say the money, then you have to mention something that is part of that money.
yeah.
So, right? So it can be perhaps in the other way around.
Okay. Or he pick up or he what sort he no
To help organize this one, right? That's why I wanted to pay attention to this case, because it can be very particular. Try to always think in the first idea, remember that you have to mention the owner, okay? The owner or any object or animal that that can be divided in parts, let's say. Okay, it sounds bad, of course, but let's talk about objects in that case. Objects that can be divided in parts, so that you can mention one of those parts later on. But if you're talking about people, first you mention the owner, the person. Try to think in the first sentence, and you have to mention that person first, and then you connect with whose to the clause that starts with the possession of that person, right? For example, you can say, I was talking, right, to the teacher whose brother was here yesterday. right? So the teacher is the owner, whose, I know I'm going to mention something that belongs to that teacher. The brother, right? It's the possession grammatically speaking, and I give information about that. All right, that's for once. Or you can say, I saw the book whose sheets, right, were all torn apart. All right, so I'm describing first the book, then part or parts of that book with whose, and I give a description about it. Okay, so try to divide your thinking in those two parts, the owner, whose, and a possession or a part of that element. So what do you say? What comes to your mind with that idea or with that explanation?
Okay, so I could say um he chose um he he chose the painting whose it has to be of the paintings. Okay, so he chose the painting whose whose I'm trying to. I mean, he chose a painting whose signature. I mean,
Yeah,
but
it is correct. If you say whose signature, it means it's part of the painting. It depends on what you want to put emphasis. Even in that case, you can invert the roles. And it sounds weird, but you can say the painting whose owner. Okay, it means that person, right? The owner, whose owner is going to be quotation mark a part of that painting. It's possible, but you can say also whose signature if you're talking just about a physical aspect of the painting. Of course, you have the painting that is the object, and of course, the signature can be a part of that painting, right? So it is possible. Anything that is part of that overall idea can be considered a possession, at least in grammar. Okay, so you can say that, but perhaps you want to continue with something else that it was not looking good for you, but continue. I believe that at least until that part, it sounds good.
okay. So I said he chose the painting whose whose signature, I mean, was unique, or I don't know how to mention the signature of the person who actually painted the painting.
In that case, right, you are, at least in that structure, it's not going to be possible, right? Or you can give extra explanation, but up to that part, it is great. To mention that, actually, if you want to mention the owner, right, you will need a different structure, right? Because this one would be forcing that too much, right? But you can say, right, he chose, right, the painting whose signature, right, and you can continue actually, belongs to this famous, right, celebrity or famous painter, right? Or to the famous, and you mentioned the person, right? So he chose the painting whose signature belongs to, I don't know, and you mention an artist over there, and that's valid. And not because you are now breaking the rule because you're mentioning the owner, no, because the creator in that case is not the main idea of your sentence. Your main idea is why this person chose that painting, right? And you're giving a description of the painting. And the element related to the painting and the signature is only, remember, this is an adjective clause. So your main idea is the painting. Everything after the painting is a description for that painting to understand why that person chose, and actually mainly what painting you're talking about, right? He chose the painting. What painting, right? The painting whose signature is this famous person. Okay, that painting. All right, so just remember the main idea of this adjective clause is to help us understand what object or what person you're talking about. And anything that you mention after that, it is to help us understand it, and that's the only purpose. All right, so I don't know if in that way you can mention the person, if it sounds good for you, or what is the thing that you want to mention and in what way, Matilde? Perhaps we can look for alternatives.
No, I think, yeah, I think it's okay. And I think, yeah, maybe it will work better in a different structure. But now I'm thinking of another example. If, for example, I want to say I sent I sent my documents to the printer whose color red is not working, or
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, it is great. It is great. Anything the printer, right, being too general, what printer, the printer whose right ink, right, red ink is not working, right? Yes, perfect. Anything. Remember, absolutely anything that helps, sorry, the person, the listener, understand what you're talking about. Okay, as long as you give that extra information, anything works, but also it has to make sense, right, between the idea of owner and possession, or global element and a part of that element. If you have that, because you're following that, right? Printer, big, the red ink, that's small, a part of it. You have the painting, big. You have the signature that is just a part of that element. And then after that, you mention the owner, but to give more specifications, not because it's a requirement, right? And again, if you want to pay attention, or if you want to mention the painter, and that's actually the main element of your thought, your thinking, then this perhaps is not going to be the best option. And you can change that. You can change, right? That's the famous painter whose painting, right, has his signature, for example, right? But you can always change the order, and you can always choose a structure that fits better with your idea. But in this case, as you were organizing your sentence, that seemed to be the best option. All right, just because of the way you were organizing that. But good, that's it. I don't know if you have questions about who's. Again, it can be tricky, right? We need to keep practicing to feel more confident and more comfortable with this. But I think you got it. But that's it. To me, that's it. I don't know if you have questions with who's.
No, it's clear right now.
All right, good. Now, we're not going to take a look at this. And this is just a reminder, because this is pretty common. You can use where and when as adjective clauses, right? The town, it's a place. So instead of, you can say in which, all right, I was born, but the alternative is to use where, right? That is the town where I was born. When we have time, you can say the day on. Sorry, I think my connection is unstable. I hope you can hear me. So you can say the day on which. Yes, Matilde, can you hear me well?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear the last minute.
Okay, so here, right, with where. Where is an alternative only when you're talking about location. All right, location, for example, the town, the city, the country, right, the restaurant. You're mentioning a place. You can simply say, right, the restaurant at which, the city in which, but your alternative is to use where anytime you have place or location as your indefinite noun. Okay, so it's an alternative only. And when you have time. So here you can simply say the day, yeah, it's working, the day on which it works. You can mention the day, the month, the year, or even a specific celebration, right? A Christmas day, I don't know. But instead of in which, at which, in which, you're going to say when. All right, so again, we're not going to work this. It's just an alternative that you have anytime that you have place, location, or time. All right, we're not working this again because it's extra to the lesson. I want to know if you have questions about this, mainly in the logic of when to use it, Matilde. Let me know, please.
No questions.
All right, now we're going to go to the real and the most important part of the lesson. But again, if the last part was not clear, this wasn't going to be possible. But now that it is, a restrictive and non-restrictive clauses. This is just what I was telling you, when to use comma and when not to use it. So let's read everything, please. It's just 2 slides, Matilde. Let's start with this
one. Okay. A restrictive clause restricts or defines the meaning of a noun or noun phrase and provides necessary information about the noun in the sentence. It is not separated from the rest of the sentence by commas. The student who sits in the back of the room asks a lot of questions. The results which I obtain may invoke positive social change. The journalist whose story I read yesterday has won prizes for her work.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is the type of clauses, right, that we've been using in the previous lessons about adjective clauses, right? They are called restrictive. Why? Because the information that you have there is not optional. It's necessary to understand what student you're talking about, what results you're talking about, what journalist you're talking about, right? And of course, it is not going to happen if you do what you were telling me and you did in some of your examples, if you use a specific noun or element, right? If you say my father, if you say my computer, right? That's more specific because it's not any father, any computer, it is mine, right? And we know that. It means that the clause is not going to be restrictive. It's going to be what we have next, non-restrictive, all right? But that's the difference. So we know this. This is just knowing how we call it. So restrictive. Now, here is where, well, the part in which we understand that anytime we use proper information, proper nouns, the specific name of something, or we mention something very unique, we have to use the comma. Okay, so let's also read this, please, Matthew. Non-restrictive.
Okay. A non-restrictive clause adds additional information to a sentence. It is usually a proper noun or a common noun that refers to a unique person, thing, or event. It uses commas to show that the information is additional. The commas almost act like parentheses within the sentence. Never do you use that in this type of clause. Minneapolis, which has a population about 400,000, is the largest city in Minnesota. I had to fix my my printer, which I bought less than a year ago. I was talking about David Gilmour, who is my favorite guitarist.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, this is very important, this element that is in parentheses here, all right? Remember that here you can use that in any of these elements, right? The student that sits, results that I, the journalist, here in this case actually not, right? But with who and which you can use that, no problem. But here you cannot, right? It's not possible. If you say Minneapolis, comma, that has, it's not correct. All right, even though it can sound correct, and in speaking you don't notice because you don't see the comma, right? Perhaps you can make a pause, but you cannot. At least in writing, it is not possible. All right, it's considered a mistake. So use always which, who, whom, and whose, and never that. All right, only when you have non-restrictive clauses. And again, this is when the information that you're giving has to be in parentheses because it is extra. Okay, and also remember this, when you wrote an idea like this, right, I showed you the importance of doing this, right? Sometimes we tend to drop the first comma, all right, and we say Minneapolis, which has a population of about 400,000, comma, is the largest city in Minnesota, right? And that's also a mistake. Why? Because here we're using parenthetical commas. It's only possible when it's at the end of the sentence. And this clause is not a complete idea by itself. It has a complete sentence, but it's a dependent clause. Okay, so if you have a dependent clause that starts with which, who, whom, and it's at the end of your complete sentence, yes, you only use one comma, right? But if your adjective clause is in the middle and the verb of this main element that you're describing, right, is afterwards, you have to use double comma. All right, in both cases, you're giving parenthetical information, but in this case, you always need to use the two commas, okay? Omitting the first one would be a grammatical mistake. But that's it. That's the only recommendation I wanted to mention and highlight. I don't know if you have any questions so that we can start working with some examples now. Matilde, let me know, please.
No, I think it's clear.
All right, very good. So let's work once again in some paragraphs, please, because here we have the two elements, restrictive and non-restrictive clauses, all right? And of course, now we have to try to use them. So we're going to give me general descriptions about whatever comes to your mind. And actually, it can be, once again, in an intense. I'm not going to give that condition. The only condition is using the two types of restrictive clauses. All right? Tell me absolutely everything. You can give me, you can present something, any object, and you can give the description of that object using this type of clauses. You can talk about an event, a past event, and you mention these clauses to give descriptions about some people, about some objects, either specific or general, right? And in that case, you decide if you use restrictive or non-restrictive clauses. But the idea is that once again, we're going to write, as I always say, right? The one paragraph is going to be more than enough if it's very complete. If you get to have one paragraph and a half or two, it is going to be better. We are going to have 8 to 9 or even, yes, 8 to 9 minutes. And you're going to try to write that, okay? A very complete one paragraph or one and a half in which you use at least, all right, at least two elements per type that you have here. Okay, so two examples with restrictive clauses and two examples with non-restrictive clauses. You can use more if you want and if it's possible according to your paragraph, but that's the minimum and the only requirement, Matilde. I don't know if you have any questions. You decide what you want to talk about. That's the only condition. Two restrictive and two non-restrictive. Let me know, please, if you have questions so that we can start with the timing.
No question, I think. Yes.
All right. So if you are, let me know when you're in the document ready to start, please. And I start with the timer as well.
Okay. Mm. I'm there.
Okay, so let's begin, please. 8 to 9 minutes, and we'll check everything that you got to write up to that point.
Okay.
Good. Okay, so let's be finishing, please, the last details. It's the 9 minutes. We're going to check what we
got. Okay, so I'll leave it here.
All right, I'm going there then. And I'm here with you, Matilde. So let's replace that.
Okay. A month ago, we had to move our office. The first office that we had, which was located in the north of the city, was the biggest that we got to have until now. That office was definitely my favorite one. It had a pool, which we were allowed to use whenever we want. Sadly, the owner didn't want to extend a contract with us, but we ended up renting the house that belonged to the owner's brother. It's a nice house too.
Great. Sorry, my camera is not now here. Okay, it seems great. All right. Of course, we didn't get to use perhaps all the elements, but the ones that we used seem great. Okay, so we're going to locate the clauses that you use. So here we have a very big idea that is being specified, right? That is the first office that we had, and you're giving information about that office, right? Which was located. So, and this is non-restrictive, right? Because it is optional. You can use that information, but if you don't use it, there we still understand that it's the office that you had, right? It's still specific. So good. Uh-huh. Okay. Even you're using here a pool. This is the second one, right? A pool. And then you have which we were allowed to use whenever we wanted. That's the adjective clause, right? The owner didn't want to extend the contract with us, but we ended up renting the house, right? Here, once again, this is restrictive, right? That belonged to the owner's brother, right? Very good. And even here, if I ask a question, in what way do you think you can change this idea using whose? Because you don't need it, but just to play with the words. How can you change this to use whose instead of that? You have to make some changes in the clause, in the one that is underlined. What do you say? What can you change to use whose in this case?
Actually, at the beginning, I was trying to use whose, but it was easier to use that. And we ended up renting the house whose
In this case, you can work in the inverted way, right? Remember, we always have owner and a possession. But in this case, if you're going to mention the owner as a part that, of course, runs the house, you can do the opposite. So here, first you mention the house, then you mention whose, and then you mention the owner that is going to be like a characteristic, being the owner of the house is going to be paradoxically also a part of the house. Okay, so here you can say we ended up renting the house whose owner, right? Right, and you give more ideas about that owner. Okay, but again, just to play with that, you can do that. All right, and it will be inverted, but it's possible in that case. Okay, so good. But this is another one. So you have one, two, the third one, and it's a nice house too. Good. Now again, just one. Then let me see the time. Good. One. Give me one, please. You have two. Yes, you have two restricted that they don't need a comma and one non-restrictive. So just speaking, please give me one non-restrictive, Matilde, and mention it's speaking, but please mention where you are putting the commas.
Okay. Um. The new house that we moved in, which wasn't our first choice, ended up being a cozy office.
Okay, good. Yes. And we know that you have commas, right, around that clause. Great. Yes, very good. It is correct because it's very specific and it can be right clear without that extra information. Of course, it adds something extra and it's even better to mention that, but it's not necessary to understand what you're talking about, right? Because we know that it's the new house, that, this, and that. Okay, good. There you go. So I don't know if you have any questions so that we can go again very shortly to the reading practice that we got. This time we're going to take a look at a new paper. So let me know, please, any questions about this?
No questions.
Okay, good. So we worked on that. Remember, you have access to this. It's in the platform, right? You have classwork, reading material, and you have these 5 elements. They are very interesting. Take a look at them. Now we're going to work with something different. We work with neuroscience, right, about adults and maturity. Now we're going to work with absolute pitch. So I don't know if you know something about it, Matilde, without taking a look at it yet. What do you know or what have you heard about absolute pitch, if you know anything about it?
You mean pitch when you pitch as, what do you call it? When you are singing, for example, and you.
Exactly. It has a pitch, right? That's the pitch of the voice, and it can be high or low.
Yeah, so when you have absolute pitch, it's the hearing. If I'm not wrong, you're able to recognize which tone. I don't know if that's the translation. Which it's not tone. Yeah, it doesn't come to my mind. Yeah, you're able to recognize which. It's not key tone. Yeah, I don't know.
It depends how specific you want to be, but yes, you're right. This is related to hearing, right? You have notes, you have figures, right? You have tones, you have pitches. But what you're saying here, it's that each note, right? Each note has a specific pitch, right? And it can be higher or lower than other notes. And the specific pitch, right, for that note can be recognized immediately by a person that has absolute pitch without any reference, right? You don't have to play one note first to say, okay, yes, it's G, right? Or it's D. No, without that, you play the right, that note, and that person can recognize the pitch, and he or she is able to tell you, right, what note you are playing exactly, right? So yes, it is correct. Now, let's take a look at this because this is still an enigma, right? We have a lot of information now, more than before, but it is still, right, not, right, case closed. It means that there's still research about it, and that's what we're going to be reading now. This is one of those papers that is going to try to explain or understand absolute pitch. So we're going to start, please, Matilde, by reading the introduction, and we're going to read the elements that I'm marking here. Let's start with that, please.
Okay. In the summer of 1763, the Mozart family embarked on the famous tour of Europe that established the young composer's reputation as a musical prodigy. Just before they left, an anonymous letter appeared in the German house. I hate German. Describes 7-year-old Wolfgang extraordinary abilities. The letter included the following. Furthermore, I saw and heard how, when he was made to listen in another room, they would give him notes, now high, now low, not only on the pianoforte, but on every other imaginable instrument as well. And he came out with a letter of the name of the note in an instant. Indeed, on hearing a bell toll or a clock or even a pocket watch strike, he was able at the same moment to name the note of the bell or the timepiece.
Okay, good, right? That's a description of someone with absolute pitch, right? There's, I think, one or two famous people with this, right? Of course, we have a lot of musicians. Perhaps it's not a big percentage, it's only 10. But we have a lot of famous people with this absolute pitch, right? I'm sure that perhaps you watch some of those shows in which they are playing, right, the sound of the ringtone or playing a bell, and they say, right, G, D, A, C. They recognize sharp, flat, and all the minimum changes. And that's, of course, very impressive, right? Of course, they relate that to childhood, right? To being exposed to music, to different, right, pitches and many things, right? But actually, it's still enigma because it's not always the case. All right, so we know that Mozart is like this. Let's keep reading, please. I'm going to ask some questions, but we need some information to this. And we are going to work with this paragraph as well, please, over here.
Okay. This passage provides a good characterization of absolute pitch, the ability to name or produce a note of a given pitch in the absence of a reference note. This ability, which is also known as perfect pitch, is very rare in our culture, with an estimated overall prevalence of less than 1 in 10,000. People with absolute pitch name musical notes as rapidly and effortlessly as most people name colors. Yet absolute pitch is often regarded as mysterious endowment and is available only to a few gifted individuals. This impression is strengthened by the fact that most famous musicians, such as Bach, Beethoven, Handel, Mannheim, Toscani, Boulez, and so on, were known to possess this ability.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Now, again, in general, I believe that the idea is there. I just want you to give me, before going, because I want you to look for the meaning of at least one word here. You're going to decide which one, but I have one in mind. But before doing so, let's keep please a short summary about these 3 paragraphs over here. What can you tell me about them, Matilde?
Okay, well, perfect pitch is a rare ability that human has, and one example of this, like paper shows, is Mozart. Then he was able to recognize the pitch of whatever sound he could hear, which is pretty rare. And yeah, like this paper says, it's a mysterious ability because it's not completely, well, it's not, we do not understand completely why this happens.
Good. We have like a short description, right? How can you define a perfect pitch or absolute pitch?
Like the ability to name pitch note of a sound.
Okay.
Without knowing which one is it?
Without any type of reference, right? You have something called that is relative pitch, right? That's what everyone, right, can develop, relative pitch. But to have it, you need first one note as reference, right? You have to play a note, and then you can have other notes and identify which, right, that note is just by relating to the first one, right? But in absolute pitch, you don't have any reference note, right? That's going to be the main difference. And that's what makes this very impressive because they make a comment, right? They are comparing doing this as people name colors, right? It's as easy as that for those, right? Well, those people that have this ability, which is once again pretty weird, right? Now, let's please look for one word. What is the word that you want to look up now, Matilde, so that you can read the definition? and to finish the class with that.
Okay, I remember one word. What was it? Yeah, endowment.
Okay, let's do it, please. Let's go to, again, you choose. It can be Google directly. Sometimes it gives more options, but the best can be Cambridge, Oxford. So you decide and let me know, please. Read the definition that you have there. Sometimes you have more than one, right? You tell me which one you believe works in this case. All right, I'm going to read that part. Once again, it says yet, so we're given a contrast. Absolute pitch is often regarded as a mysterious endowment, which is available only to a few gifted individuals. All right, so let's read when you have that ready, please.
Okay. Well, according to Cambridge, money that is given to college hospital in order to provide it with an income or giving office money. I don't think that's the case. Insurance, no. We changed the page.
You can use even like that meaning, but applied in a metaphorical way or abstract way. Let's try to do it because it's not directly the meaning that we need, but the meaning is like a secondary meaning that we can derive from that one. So how can you relate that you read, Tilde, to this idea? Once again, yet absolute pitch is often regarded as a mysterious endowment that is available only to a few gifted individuals. And it's related to that last part, gifted individuals. What do you say? What could it be?
Where was it? Mr. Yeah, yet absolute pitch is often recorded. Like a gift, but
it is related to that. Not always. You can consider that endowment a gift, but not always, right? So when we hear say, right, mysterious endowment, you're talking about something that you are given that is not always going to give a gift, right? But is an extra characteristic that some people, all right, have. And again, in this case, they talk about, right, if you take a look at the definitions that you get, it's receiving something, all right? Receiving something. In this case, this endowment can be related to an ability, all right, to a characteristic. It can be a physical or a psychological characteristic, okay? So anything that you are given, it's going to be this, all right, an endowment, because they are using again this word in a metaphorical way. So this thing that you are receiving, that in this case is positive, right? Because not always that you are given or everything that you're given can be positive for you or can be considered as a gift, right? But in this case, there is a connection between this that you have or that these people are given by, I don't know, life, and the consideration of regarding that as a gift. Okay, so again, we can take that just as an ability characteristic that few people have, that is mysterious, and that is a gift for them in this case. So I don't know if you agree with that. If you found a different meaning, let me know, please, Matilde, so that we can have that. And again, remember, you can always keep looking for different elements, but in this case, we're using this word in that way. Let me know, please, if you have questions or comments.
No questions. Yeah,
All right, so once again, we're finishing here. This is a new one. We are always going to encounter new words, new details. And once again, right now we are using dictionaries, we're using the internet to take a look at that. But remember that in the test, you're going to be facing this, and we have to try to do right the most to understand that just by the context, right? Some of the words are going to be, of course, harder than others, but always try to pay attention to the words you have around it to, again, we have that for sure, right? We understand that, but in the test can be very different. And there we can really understand the meaning of paying attention to the context, because sometimes it's not only reading the words you have around, but it's trying to understand the possible meaning that all those words can have to change the meaning also of the word that you don't know. All right, so let's please finish here. This is the 6th class. We have 2 more classes to go. You have the poll over there with you, Matilde. So that's it. Again, thanks for being in today's class, and I hope that everything goes well, and I'll see you tomorrow, Matilde.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Okay, bye-bye. Good night.
Bye.